All right, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now open the public meeting of September 17th, 2019, here in the Houghton Building under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233. So the Bolton Conservation Commission will begin this evening by addressing an inquiry from Curtis Plant regarding an addition to an existing single-family home.
Good evening.
How are you?
So this is not a public hearing item. Curtis had informed me that previously, I think in 2007, you said the kitchen had been approved under an informal discussion, or not approved but authorized, so when the building permit comes through, I'm okay to sign off on it. So he was just inquiring the same about the addition.
So this resident,
Where are we right now?
269.
269.
Yeah, sorry, we jumped to the bottom.
So back in 2000, we did a very large kitchen addition off on the south side of the property, and there's bordering vegetated wetlands over here. And when we came in, they just had me put some erosion control in the area of construction. We're now, the owners have changed hands, and the new owner is putting a new in-law one-story addition with a two-car garage attached. And there is bordering vegetated wetlands within approximately, 60 feet to the property line, and then there's wetlands. Then there's a common driveway, so it's roughly around 100 feet away. Which that driveway shares a hammerhead lot in the rear. So what I'm looking to do is just do the same thing, and that is do some erosion control measures here, just for the line of safety. And
what are you proposing for erosion control? Those wattles?
well, some people like wattles, some people like hay and silt. So it's what the desires of the board. Everybody in each town has their own pet peeves on what they want to see. The straw wattles are easy to put in, which I can do, but I'd have to hire somebody to do the hay and salt. Some people don't like the hay because it brings in invasive species.
Usually we say straw.
You
It's
know,
usually
so,
what we request, yeah.
It's whatever the pleasure of the board is.
Okay, thank you. So I guess it's a two-part question. The first is, can we address this under an informal? And the other question is, if so, what erosion control does the commission want?
Can I ask you, we were out there yesterday trying to see where the driveway comes in. I was trying to picture, I know some of it was flagged.
So that's what you have in your-
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was just trying to understand what the flags were.
The stakes represent the actual corners of the building.
Okay,
Oh, is that
that's
what it
what
was?
we're kind of guessing. Yeah.
Yeah, so
So it
there's,
did have silt fence written all over the stakes.
I crossed them off.
Yeah, so one was scratched out. Yeah, I was like, wait, wait.
I didn't bring my black magic marker.
Was it a Trump magic marker?
Was that-
Never mind.
So those stakes just represent a representation of
Where the building is going to be gone.
where the
Yeah.
building is. And the existing driveway
Comes right up.
comes
to
like
yeah.
this and then goes around like that. This barn over here was raised many
I was
years
gonna say, I was like, I was just trying to figure out
Chicken
where the
coop
building is.
there now, or
Yeah,
something.
the
like that.
coop's still in the back, though, right? That's
Yeah,
that one,
well,
No, that's the, I thought, anyway.
the chicken coop is on a
Yeah.
sled. They
Yeah,
picked it up.
right.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm sorry. I meant the back barn there.
Oh, the
Yeah,
back
yeah,
barn
that's
is
kinda-
a hot
Metal
tin
sheet.
roof.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
danger. They're going to address that after the addition goes on at some later date. So the property line, is 60 feet. So between 60 and 100, I think, is where some of the wetlands come in. But it's on the other side. It's on the north side of the
On
driveway.
the other side of that gravel road?
Right.
So this driveway goes,
So there's another driveway that comes in.
it goes back there.
It services the back house. You really can't see it because it's hidden by quite a few trees that were planted.
Oh,
So,
I didn't notice it, I didn't,
yeah, it like follows the black pen.
but it seemed to me that the perennial stream was between where you're trying to put that and on that side of the trees,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah, it seemed like
Uh,
that was the one.
It just seemed like that the perennial stream
Between
was,
the gravel driveway and the property?
yeah, it seemed like it was along here as
Yeah.
opposed to on another side of a bunch of trees, but I might be wrong.
It could just be little ones too. Yeah, it was hard to.
So, we were out, Brian and I were out there the other day, it seemed to me that the stream was along here. I hardly even noticed it, this is a driveway?
Yeah, it's just.
I didn't
I
hardly
didn't,
even notice.
I didn't notice it either. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't
So there's
notice
nobody
It's
back,
literally
Yeah.
the driveway.
Oh, there is?
Oh, there is, yeah.
and they use the driveway?
it. It drops
yeah.
both
Yeah.
sides into-
But I didn't notice any
Well, no.
driveway there, I'll have to go back and take another look, but I thought the stream was on like this side of whatever. I know there were trees, if I
It's on
remember.
the north side.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
it's bone dry on the south side,
Yeah.
and, because it slopes
down
off
to the
and then
gravel and then goes
goes
back
off
down.
and it drops again.
So what we're talking about is something to protect that.
Well, the question is, do we need an RDA? I would say it's not an NOI. It's probably definitely not an NOI. Just one person's opinion. You know, could it be an RDA? Is it just something we can not so much condition, but say,
Well, you can condition.
well, we can condition, but don't require a filing? So I guess that would be the question. Sorry,
So my limited construction is on the top.
yeah.
So it's within the.
It's on the top of the slope, I'm not looking to put the erosion control down, I'm just looking to, on the, before it goes down,
Right.
So where that
Whereas
chicken coop
below.
was, that was where on the back side of it, that's where one of the stakes was, and that's the limit of work.
And that's
Yeah.
outside the buffer, outside the,
Well, it's probably
It's just within.
Just
yeah.
just within it.
Yeah.
But what he's saying is it's his property, or the, property owner's land that they're proposing that addition on, then it drops to the gravel driveway and then to the wetland. So that's why, previously it was on the opposite side of the house as well, which added to it, I'm sure. But, that's why he wasn't sure if it could be covered on the informal discussion.
And the gravel driveway is an easement, it's owned by this property.
Well, it's just my opinion, and I don't know, but we looked at the stakes, but it seems to me that it slopes down if you're looking towards the road. If you're looking towards the road at that, it just seemed to slope down. So if you're standing in the driveway like this,
Looking towards.
look, this is where it seemed to slope down, but I didn't see any gravel driveway
The
there.
driveway is grassed over, I was surprised to see as much grass as.
And it's being used?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I
So
didn't
is
see
the
it.
driveway elevated? So it slopes down and then it comes back up to the driveway?
It levels and then it drops to the wetland.
Huh.
So it slopes down to a level driveway.
Yeah.
And that's
To
what
And then the wetlands is on the
Other side.
other side of
But
the,
it's literally
so the
just
other side of the
right
driveway would be,
to the
if
north
you're
side.
facing the road, it would be
literally didn't even see it.
towards Sugar Run, right?
Down into
Towards
there.
the animal farm, towards,
Oh boy.
if you're looking at it like this, the driveway is on this side of the house. If you standing at the house looking at Harvard Road.
So it sounds
So
like we need
this-
another
Yeah,
site.
exactly.
Yeah, it would be,
Oh yeah.
I think so too, but that's the only thing I would say, because it seems to me, my memory of it, I don't remember seeing another driveway there. And if I did see a driveway, it was well disguised, and I thought it was just not a perennial stream,
You
it
can
looked
still
like
poke
an
around
intermittent
and
stream
we got
that
a nice
goes in
little
there.
walk around.
Because it does go under the road there, it goes across under the,
Yeah, from the cape on the other side,
so which is,
but that's all north of the driveway.
we should go take a look.
So if you're
Yeah.
standing on the road looking into the property,
It's on the left,
it's on the left.
yeah, but
The
that's,
driveway's on the left, and then the wetlands are to the left of that.
yeah. Yeah, but there's a driveway between the wetlands and that was disguised as a grass.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
There's grass and it's elevated.
Wow.
It's
I
all-
didn't notice, you didn't?
No, I didn't either. Yeah, I know.
It's all elevated,
Yeah.
then it slopes down, flattens off.
You know, what Brian and I were just looking at, what were the stakes were. I didn't really have any idea that they were gonna put a building on there. We didn't know whether it was gonna
Just
be
on
a
the
deck
border,
or, you know, or a 24-story building.
It's a frost wall crawl space.
I'm not debating that. I just wasn't sure exactly
Yeah,
where.
I would want to probably see runoff too.
Okay, so it sounds like you want an
Yeah.
RDA for this then.
Yeah, or at the very least, we'd probably want another site visit to look. And I would think if we did that, then we could make known to you whether it's worth coming back or if it's better just to file the RDA and come back
Yeah.
that way.
My name is Jeff, but are you the contractor?
Yes.
Okay, so you weren't available when Brian and I were out there. You were down vacationing on the Cape
We
or
went
something?
over-
I wish I was
Yeah.
fishing.
Yeah.
But I had a job to finish out
Anyway,
for the previous owner.
so the next
Gotcha.
site visit might be better to have you
I'm
along.
back.
Yeah, I can see that.
Unless the weather calms down, then I'll try and get out fishing.
Yeah.
Well, we can, Brian and I are available,
But yeah, no, well, now that I have an idea what I'm looking for too,
Yeah.
I'm surprised that there was a driveway there.
I
I'm
didn't
surprised.
either.
I can't believe I looked right at it. But I think that's probably best right now. So we'll go take another look.
Yeah, we'll do it next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do it this coming, we can do it, I can do it anytime actually, between now and the next meeting.
Yeah. We'll have to kind of email around. I have some
Yeah,
days.
if that's okay with you.
Yeah, whatever works. We're just waiting on.
What's
signature.
what's their time frame? How fast do they want to get things moving?
Their mother-in-law is waiting me to build it, and she's out in Ohio at the moment.
Oh,
So they transferred their family. The kids are in school now.
Here?
Yes.
okay, well, we can move this as fast, but I think it's a good idea.
I would definitely take a
So
look.
I can be accommodating
You know.
at this point.
Right. As far as
Your
the,
next meeting is October 1st, so it's a
Yeah.
week
yeah,
difference, or 2 weeks difference.
if you don't mind, if that's okay with you, it's okay with everybody.
So do you want him to file an RDA as well?
That-
Because
I'll
if
leave that
so,
to you.
He needs to get it to me by like tomorrow, for October 1st.
Because that's
Yeah.
a publicly posted.
Yeah, it has to be
Yeah.
advertised.
It's probably, in my opinion, we can poll too. It's probably best to do the RDA just because now that it's a roof, we're going to talk runoff and gutters, and it does all flash down into those lower areas from that side of the property. It seems like everything flows
Yeah.
down this way, right? Everything kind of flows down that way.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's probably more of an RDA at this point, I would think. I
And
think
then, do you still want to schedule the sidewalk before the next
Yes.
meeting?
yeah, if possible.
I think that would be good. I'm just curious to see what this driveway, that doesn't look like a driveway, that looks like
Do you know what
an
your
intermittent
availability
stream
is
to me,
for
but,
next week?
huh? Anytime.
But we can plan a site visit now. We're looking on for 7 o'clock for October 1st.
I can't do Monday or Thursday.
Okay. Jeff, what is your availability?
Whatever Brian's is.
Okay. Is anyone else needing to go back out to the site?
If it's a morning, I can go.
If
If it's
it's
in
a
the
morning.
evening, I can go.
Okay. So let's pick, Jeff, can you go out in the morning?
Yep,
And Brian, you can go out in the evening?
depends on the time of the morning, of course.
Okay, so what time in the
What time
morning
do you
will work?
want?
10:30.
Perfect.
10:30, on what day? What would work?
It's up to you.
No, if you're doing 10:30, figure out any day, yeah. 'Cause I wouldn't
Monday.
be at that one, but I can
Monday.
also.
Monday,
Does that work for you?
Sure.
23rd.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then for evening? Evening time.
They're all about the same.
Yeah.
What time?
After 5:30.
After 5:30.
Actually, in that case, do you want to try Monday at 5:45? Is that too early? I mean, if you can hit it on your way home, it's not like we're taking it deep.
on my way home, but yeah.
Yeah, well, it doesn't. I was just saying, I don't know what I mean. If 5:45 works, because then I have something that evening, but we should only be there 20 minutes if that. That's my guess.
So,
Probably less than
so
that.
what are we doing?
Yeah.
We go 10:30 in the morning on Monday
So 10:30 in the morning.
with
Correct.
Correct.
And then 5:45, Kip and Brian.
Yeah, and I don't know how Kip feels. If you can't be there both morning and night,
I can do
I can understand. I just want to get an idea. I just want to look
No,
in there and see what's
no.
going on. But if you can, that's
No,
great.
that's-
Yeah.
That's fine,
All right. Perfect. Then yeah.
not a problem.
And I'll send out an email tomorrow with
Yeah.
a reminder.
Thank you.
10:30 for me, or I can do either one, but
You be there.
10:30.
Do anything you want.
Yeah.
All right.
And you need me to file that tomorrow? Okay.
I already have the plans,
Yeah.
you just have to submit them.
Submit the application?
Yes,
Okay.
Yep.
And the fee,
the fee is $45, and then the ad fee,
right?
you have to call either Bolton Independent or Clinton Item, because you deal directly with them. So I send the legal notice,
Yeah.
whichever one you pick, and then you pay them directly. And I'm not sure what the fee is for them.
Yours is 45.
Yep, for just the filing fee.
And then the ad, and I pick the paper.
You just have one,
It's Bolton Common or who?
Bolton
Clinton?
Independent or the Clinton Item. And then just let me know which one, so I know who to send it to.
Which do you do business with more often?
I do both, often.
Any preference? Alright. Very good.
All right. Thank you.
Alright, we'll see you Monday.
see you Monday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you. Goodbye.
Let's come up, Mr. Peters.
Are we Foxborough?
Yes.
All right. The Bolton Conservation Commission will now address violations reported and cited on September 4th, 2019 at property located at 175 Foxton Road and the potential restoration efforts. Motion to authorize the issuance of an enforcement order on behalf of the Commission by the Conservation Administrator on September 4th, 2019 to the property owner of 175 Foxton Road, Bolton, Mass. Following violations: 1, drawing water from a brook for hydroseeding. 2, hydroseeding material dispersed into brook about 150 feet throughout. 3, wetland vegetation alteration, significant erosion resulting from disturbance. 4, riverfront area alteration, removal of vegetation and fill material in place prior to hydroseeding, significant erosion resulting from disturbance. And 5, prohibited activity within conservation restriction, inclusive of removal of vegetation, fill material in place, significant erosion resulting from disturbance. How are you receiving
Yeah,
it? Go ahead.
so, I noticed the landscape was named in that as well. Part of this is relevant to them, so they are here as well.
Okay.
Which we appreciate. So, obviously you received the enforcement order, we were out on site. I gave the commission an update, the same thing that I notified you of in terms of violations that our chair had just read. So they're before us currently to just hear what the commission would like them to do in terms of restoration or remediation. In terms of, because they've shared an interest in continuing the hydro seeding for the portion of their property that they may, I basically stated that they will need to have the line of the conservation restriction surveyed, and they had stated that they had reached out to an engineer or a surveyor who had actually been copied on emails with myself as well, so I know that they have done that. So again, there's removal of vegetation in the conservation restriction. There is some erosion that occurred because of the removal of vegetation, and then in addition to that, the material that went into the stream. The stream itself, from what I can see, seems that it's good. They've removed the majority of the material that day. They put up silt fence right away at my request because we were supposed to receive and did get a moderate rainstorm for the next day. So that was to be able to make sure that nothing washed downstream and pooled and caused deposits downstream. there was some trampling of wetland vegetation, but in a relatively concentrated area. So that, I think, can be remediated fairly easily, but I didn't do a full assessment, because obviously, if that's what the commission wishes them to do, they'll have a wetland scientist working with them to do so. So I guess my first question would be, did you have a survey completed of the conservation restriction line?
Well, he didn't put up any stakes or anything like that. I guess we were waiting for direction from you folks.
Okay.
I mean, I know part of this was to like not do anything till
Right.
we were instructed, so.
And we appreciate you. That's why we're not finding you or continuing enforcement matters at that point, because you stopped, and we're working towards remediation, restoration of that. So within the conservation restriction, it doesn't allow removal of vegetation, so that's why, when I was out there I was called out for the, one of the hoses purged, aside from them not, they should have been drawing from the brook at first anyways, but then it purged and material ended up in the brook, like I said, that they removed. So that was the original call I went out to address, and while I was there, saw that quite a significant amount had been cleared, and a portion of that was within the conservation restriction, which I found after returning to my office and looking at the definitive subdivision plans, which were provided by the town planner. So again, what we're looking at is, what does the commission want them to do in terms of restoration remediation? Does the commission want them to hire a wetland scientist and do a restoration of those plants? Any work related to the erosion, replanting of the area that's been depleted of vegetation at this point. There is loam down, some hydro seeding. Jeff, I think, is looking at the picture right now.
This one here.
Yeah. And there is a portion that once they have surveyed exactly on the property where that conservation restriction line lies, they can certainly hydro seed from that line to their single-family home structure.
If they put something, silk fence or something like that in.
Yeah, well, they're doing a hydro seed. So that's what they're looking for, so that they can proceed with their project. Is what exactly does the commission want them to do to correct the issue?
Do we know what kind of vegetation was there before?
There's just,
Because if I look where it hasn't been cleared, it's mostly wooded,
yeah,
with
it's-
interspersed maybe ferns, right?
Yep, there's like
So-
ferns, shrub, brush material.
I wanted to go back to what I
It's
wanted
not like
before.
you'd go back and plant a bunch of stuff, right? Because it was kind of natural wooded.
Yep, so that's, you can throw down, we've seen like logging seed mix, like what we saw on the access road. We've seen that interspersed with some native bushes or some native trees, just to encourage that to grow in and not encourage invasives or something we wouldn't want growing there.
What is the one I give you? Go to right here.
What?
Right.
No. Oh,
I'm missing
right.
a couple pages of things.
You have any before pictures?
No.
I mean, I'm just sort of curious if you happen to have
So
What
if
this
you
place
were on
looked
the
like
property
before.
and you can look on either side, I imagine it was a contiguous line.
so like that.
forested
It was a
area.
lot like that.
Yep.
No, that's my copy, but you're
I have
willing
this
to
one.
look at, yeah.
So,
Just-
yeah,
But-
I mean, you're saying it was quite.
Is this something that should have been brought to our attention first before this
Yes.
stuff started?
Yep. I don't know if you were aware though that there was a conservation restriction on your property.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, so that's what the issue is.
I mean,
Not
the,
a comment, yeah.
can I see that? So, to get a before sense, I mean, the lawn went pretty much to the tree line anyways. Did we extend beyond that a slight bit? We did. But, I mean, if I'm reading the stuff you sent me that identifies a conservation restriction, yeah, certainly it would appear as though we're in that,
So that's,
outside the boundary. But the lawn, when we moved in, went pretty much to the tree line to begin with.
So this was
it's not
lawn
like,
before, where it's dirt here, that was lawn?
so if you look at this tree going across to this tree,
Yeah.
it's pretty much all along, it went all the way to the tree line.
So the lawn previously was through here?
Yeah, so if you look, of course this is the back of the house, and I don't know where there's a tree from where this picture is taken, but, there's obviously a tree here, a tree there. So the property line pretty much followed, maybe it didn't go as far as this tree, but it certainly went as far as this tree. So whereas the conservation restriction, maybe that orange line represents
Yeah, that's what
that.
I was trying.
So it's not, we didn't extend it from that orange line to where it is now. In some places it's maybe 5 feet beyond where it was previously for the past 23 years. Maybe in some places it's 10 feet beyond that.
So unfortunately, it sounds like whoever built the home or owned the home before you
Well,
may
with the
have.
original owner, so
Oh.
yeah, when it was built.
With the original owner.
Yeah, with the
Off on,
original
yeah,
owner.
where they cleared to.
So for whatever that's worth,
So
because you were
What
asking.
was the work that was done then, if there was lawn there before?
Well, just the we're gonna be selling the house
Yeah.
and the backyard just didn't
Was
grow
it patchy?
raspberry.
Okay,
We had irrigation installed, the landscape was brought in some loom, and we're trying to, basically make it look respectable, so for when we market the house, so, that was, the objective. We're painting the house, we're
right.
remodeling the
I'm just trying to
bathroom.
understand what
Objective,
what it was like before the work was done,
yeah.
what the condition was.
Me too. So this tree line here is this tree line here. That looks like, right?
I don't think that's the same area,
You don't think so?
right? Different views, but what he's saying is
So
that this
I-
was lawn when they purchased the property
This?
by the developer.
Yeah, so the
So
tree,
they reloaned and reseeded, but it was originally lawn to the tree line.
I think this tree.
Is
no,
this tree?
Is this tree.
Yeah.
And then, these trees are probably like these trees, or maybe these trees over
These
here.
guys here, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're probably these guys.
Yeah, this tree is this tree.
It's really hard to say without knowing.
So
can you see
that's
the
why I
difference?
was stating if they survey the conservation restriction, then
Right.
there's zero question, and we know regardless of, if it was 5 feet, 10 feet, 50 feet,
Follow
this
the
is
conservation
area.
restriction
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
But it's associated with the deed and the definitive subdivision plan, so I agree with what you said earlier, and I don't think you need to replant a whole forest there.
Right.
It's gonna naturally develop over time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think certainly allowing the area to revegetate
Mm-hmm.
and then assisting it with whether it be a seed mix, a few plantings or not. Just because the other concern is that area really needs to be stabilized soon. There was an area where all the water drained to and it overtopped the silt fence and actually gullied out part of the slope going down to the brook. And they fixed the silt fence. I don't know, did the landscaping company remove the silt as well, or just the material that was?
No, we haven't removed anything, we just cleaned up that day.
That material?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So but that's something again that could be addressed with, once this is stabilized, that won't happen anymore, and that can be addressed with just manually removing the silt, because it's just a deposit right at the bottom of the slope, which is still not good and it shouldn't happen, but in terms of remediating that, it should be relatively contained.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think you should plant back there, to put back in there?
I think the mix, the seed
Yeah.
mix
Yeah.
is appropriate.
Something very fast growing that'll
So
grab a
seed
little
mix,
quickly.
a couple bushes, something like that.
That's what I was trying to figure out. It's probably we do our natural seed mixes, and then it's a question of having probably should be 2 or 3 trees, depending,
Couple of trees.
if possible.
Yeah.
So do you want whomever they hire to, will note that you want a native seed mix, trees and shrubs, native trees and shrubs, and have them suggest, because maybe they want a planting plan?
These gentlemen would be whatever, I mean, we're not landscapers, so whatever would happen, you know, they'd be doing something because you wanna tell them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you'd be able to convey it with a.
Yeah,
The other thing I was thinking too, and I don't know if it's appropriate to ask, is to get not just to get surveyed, but to delineate the line, which we've done in the past. A lot of people do. Some people have used split rail fence. Some people have used boulders, just big enough boulders you can't. So there is a delineation, so people realize
That
this
there's
is
a line.
conservation area
That's a
behind
good
here.
idea.
You can't.
you can do it with landscaping as well, in terms of vegetation, but more, you know, do a line of shrubs or something like that.
What is the definition of that line?
What do you mean, what is the
I
definition?
mean, where
It's
is it?
conservation land within the development, right?
And
Well-
that's defined in the deed, the original.
Yeah, it's right there.
Does
So
it
I'm
say
gonna
that?
finish up
This
with
one,
that.
if this one helps, but there's the property. So this is all conservation restriction,
Okay.
and the house is about right here. So.
Yeah.
So all this stuff
This is
ended up
what
in
we
there,
find
right?
right there, right? Like conservation.
So
It's
that,
not.
that on the plans is,
On the plans it is.
it is, right there in
Yeah.
front of you,
Correct.
and the deed itself.
So
Yes, yeah.
there's no real, and like I said, other places have done boulders or something.
Yeah,
or there'll
on
be
the
a planting.
property, there's no delineation or stakes or, mound marker that I saw. So that's why I was saying, if they have it surveyed, then they know, okay, this exactly draws the line in the sand.
Right.
This is what future buyers, this is what we can alter, and there's no question about it. The other thing about this conservation restriction throughout the development is that it actually preserved a lot of the resource areas, so that as they were developing, they weren't within jurisdiction for the commission. So that was sort of a agreement that was done during the development. It looks like, and I've talked to the town planner, her records and minutes show that. So for instance, this one is actually riverfront area as well. So it's even, yeah, you're even double not supposed to be touching it, to be general. So that's why it's even more important to really delineate for future homeowners as well, because you stated if you want to sell it, you can play back there, explore the brook, do whatever you want, but in terms of altering it, you really can't do much.
Mostly you have to come to us first, if you're gonna do something in that,
Yes.
Yeah.
you know,
That is
Yeah.
all.
which would have been a good idea.
Yeah. So I guess it sounds like for the top part of it, it would be a delineate, reseed, and,
Right.
and come up with a small planting plan, native planting plan, nothing too great, but something to hold together, and like I said, native seed mixture.
Right.
And a delineation. But then when we get down to the banks, this silt removal that's basically after everything's been stabilized up top.
Yep.
Is there any other concerns, any other things as you get down to the bank side? You know, there's a lot of standing concerns with things.
The right as, and it's basically just where they were walking down to clean it in the main route, I guess, to access the brook from their property. There's a relatively small area of wetland vegetation that was trampled, so that may even just be wetlands. It may be just another seed mix solution.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like
For whatever it's worth, I don't know if it's still going on today, but a lot of times, high school, I'm assuming high school students would be dropped off at our house and they'd walk through our yard and through that area there
Oh, they
every
cut
day.
down there
Yeah.
anyways.
There's like, almost like a stone bridge that goes across the brook
Yeah.
that's kind of collapsed.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how they get across, but, you know, they used to come back and forth,
Yeah, okay.
on a pretty, daily basis.
Okay. Yeah, this is.
So
their-
that is the trampoline that's there.
Yeah, and again, I'm really more concerned because that area is so concentrated, and I'm pretty sure that either a seed mix would solve that, and that may be something they have on hand,
Yeah.
what the landscaping company has on hand, or, there's some plantings down there, but typically it's better to use the wetland seed mix.
Mhm.
It takes better. But the silt deposits are really what I'm concerned with now that we've gotten the material that was purged through the hose cleaned up, that blue material. That's my concern, but that will have to be manually removed by basically 5-gallon buckets and carry them up, and dump them outside the resource area or remove it from the site.
Did they already
I
do
thought
that,
they
the
did that.
landscapers?
No, they
You
were just
talking
saying the
about the
silt, they
hydro seed?
didn't. I'm not talking about the hydro seed.
Oh.
So I'm
okay.
saying the hydro seed or the paper mulch that purged into the brook, that's what they cleaned up.
Yeah.
So that was that
Oh, you're not
green
talking
blue
about
material.
that.
No, I'm talking about the material that had overtopped the silt fence at the
Oh,
top of
okay.
the slope, and it actually scoured the side, and now there's, right at the base of that gully, really, is a pile of silt, or sediment at that point. So that just has to be manually removed, and then there's 2 further down, but then after that, it wasn't causing deposits.
2 what? for
2
the-
deposits
Okay.
of that material, but again, that's manually removed, so
Okay.
it shouldn't be a problem because it's concentrated to those 3 spots.
Okay, so for right now, as I understand it, we're to have that material that penetrated the silt fence removed manually by hand with 5-gallon buckets. Get the surveyor to establish a line for the restriction,
Yeah,
and what, anything, is that it? for
and then the
Do we-
plantings.
Planted, so wetland seed, you said?
Wetland seed mix.
So,
Wetland
well,
seed.
the wetland seed mix is down by the brook, in that area we talked about, where the source of that hydroseeding material was. But upgrading from the top of the slope, so the area inside the conservation restriction, not the area you can alter, the area closer to the brook, that will need the native seed mix, native shrubs, native trees, and we'll leave it up to you and your landscaping company to determine how exactly you want to arrange the shrubs and trees.
Okay,
Um,
you guys have a handle on that?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yep.
But they
Okay.
have to be native species.
And
So
what we
that
can
will-
do is we can email before we put any seed down in the
Yep.
plans to make
Yeah.
sure you guys agree with what we're gonna put it down.
Yes, that would be excellent.
I'll keep that in mind.
So what kind of seed did you say?
So the wetland seed mix,
Yeah, what is that? I'm just curious. It's not grass, obviously. It's
no,
something
so
very
it's the
different.
vegetation that you find in a wetland, so
Okay.
there may be,
If you ever see like a wildflower mixes, sometimes
Yes.
it's like that, but
Yes,
it's
okay.
not just flowers. If that makes sense, yeah.
Okay, so wetland seed mix, surveyor, and what was the first one I mentioned?
silt removal.
So,
Sure. Is anybody here to comment or questions on this tonight? Okay.
and
Go ahead.
do we follow up with you, you follow up with us? What-
So I will send out a letter via mail and email, just establishing what we talked about tonight and what you're required to do. And then at that point, it sounds like I'll be speaking with the landscaping company to see what they're proposing, at your discretion with the native plantings that we've suggested this evening. And then from there, we'll be, as long as you keep that line of communication open until it's completed, you shouldn't have any more issues. Watch the erosion control if it's up while, actually that's something too, while this is being restored, there should be a line of silt fence at basically where it is now,
Yeah,
maintaining the area that's there, just to make sure we don't have any
yeah, so
further.
the material that's there is stabilized.
Yes.
It
Yep.
takes root and is stabilized and stuff, yeah.
So once a portion of it's complete, then I'll go out to a site visit, so we'll do periodic site visits, but I'll always check in with you first before I'm out on site.
do we need to move a motion?
Yes.
Close, okay,
Yeah.
so, and basically it's to authorize the enforcement order?
Yep.
Okay. So in that case, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the issuance of an enforcement order on behalf of the Commission by the Conservation Administrator on September 4th, 2019, for the property owner 175 Fox Run Road, Bolton, Mass, for the violations noted at the beginning of this hearing. Is there anything else that needs to put in? All right. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay.
So that was just memorializing,
Yeah.
because we have to do at the next public meeting, the enforcement order that was issued, to have it on record, and now we'll just be working with you to bring it to.
Okay, so, like, I know you mentioned it was like an October 1st meeting, like we're gonna
Yes.
be.
Nope,
Okay,
unless
that's
for some
January.
reason there's a problem and we need you to come in and talk, or if the line of communication or the work to come into compliance stops for any reason, at that point we would be issuing fines for $300 per day per violation. So because you haven't gone there and you haven't stopped the line of communication, you're working to come in compliance, I don't foresee that happening, but you would get a notification from me prior to that occurring, and we would request you to be at the next meeting.
But if everything is progressing normally and going along
Yeah,
well, you
then
probably would not need to come to the next meeting.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have no one, I mean, you know, we do what we have to do, so.
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so we're good then?
Yes.
All right,
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Going okay.
Do we have any information? All right, well,
Um,
I think I'd open it. The Bolton I'm good. Well, I'll do one at a time. Bolton Conservation Commission. Bolton Conservation Commission will continue a public hearing. Will now continue a public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a notice of intent filed by Scott Goddard regarding proposed driveway improvement located at 21 Century Mill Road. Becca, is there any updates on this?
Nope, I have received no new engineered plans, no new documentation. As requested at the last Conservation Commission meeting, I have also not received a request for continuation or any communication from the applicant since then.
So, I think technically speaking, if I'm correct, we have to close it.
Yep.
Actually, well, at least we can get it all into one thing maybe next time. Comments tonight on this? We're probably not going to have much in the way of discussion. We're probably just going to close out all three. My guess is we're going to take no action on them because the plans are incomplete. Really can't.
So we would
Sit.
vote next meeting.
Yeah, we could close and vote next meeting is what we'd probably do.
What does this mean in terms of, is it just basically the whole project is on pause?
No, so the whole, because we've received no new submissions, we've received no request for continuation, the commission has to close, but also they may close. And at that point, at the next meeting, they would vote on whether they feel they have enough information. Well, the reason to close would be they feel they have enough information to make a decision whether to authorize the project or deny the project or issue with an order of conditions, or close it, and when you deny based on findings, or you authorize it based on various findings, whether they're the same or different. And then, so really, the commission, if they're just closing, they're not making any decision.
Okay.
But no new information can be submitted after they close. So it can't be next meeting someone submits something that changes everything. It's just closed. The public hearing stops, so there's no new information from the applicant or residents or the community. It's then the time for the commission to make the decision at that point. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, yeah. Sort of. So if I wanna raise some issue, you're saying I have to do it right now?
Yes.
Yes,
If it's
yeah,
new
I was gonna say,
information,
Uh,
yes.
No, I don't have any specific new information, but you know me well enough at this point. I have always have lots of questions,
Sure.
so, but I don't know that, you're not really here to educate me about the specifics of a civil engineering drawing plan.
No.
But I could come to you and say, here's a 100-foot buffer. What does this really mean? Can you disturb any vegetation within this 100-foot buffer?
Yeah.
Or, and so what is the significance of this buffer if you
Yeah.
can build
So-
or disturb vegetation within it?
Right.
I have questions like that.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about, like, different things about the bylaw and the regulations, but not necessarily specific to the project after it's closed. So like if you had questions in general about, in the adjacent upland resource area, is there ever a time when you are allowed to remove or are permitted to remove vegetation? Things like that. And the answer is, you can in some circumstances, but it's existing structures, maintaining landscape, it's most of the time things that are already there. But a lot of that actually, if you look in our regulations, it's pretty clear. Not that everyone has time to read through them all the time,
Right.
but it does lay out pretty nicely.
Okay, I guess I do have one touchy question. It has to do with the conflict of interest clause. In wetland specialists, if they've got a financial interest in a project, they're supposed to disclose this right away per wetlands by land, maybe not the town of Bolton's laws, but associations and so forth. You got my drift.
Yeah.
It was almost a year, it seemed like, before we heard anything about
It was.
financial interest in a project. So, has this been taken to the next step in going to regulatory authorities, or do I have the cart before the horse here?
Well, no,
or-
and I had a question too, Rebecca. You maybe even answer this one too. Sorry.
I'm
Yeah,
at
I know. I'm not sure because I read those same bylaws that they had that clearly stated he's supposed to state upfront if he has a significant financial, if that was a regulatory body that he's part of or a trade association. In other words, if you're not a member of the bar, you can't practice law.
Right.
If you're not a member of the Hog Farmers of America, you can still farm hogs.
Oh, right.
So I'm wondering if he's outside the bylaws of his
Right.
if his trade, but that doesn't really have an effect on what we should do
Okay.
or what we can do.
I guess my question then is, there was a telephone number at the bottom, and it said, please do not discuss this with anyone. Call me or call this number and we'll talk about it. Well, I sort of thought, better this come from you guys than from me as just, Joe Blow, an adjacent landholder. It just seems prudent to me that someone would call and find out, is this, as you say, the American Hog Association, which really has no bearing, or is this in a sense, kind of a regulatory body? There was a place where you could type in a name and see whether somebody was a signatory to this organization or whatever, and Scott's there. So maybe he's no longer a member of this, but I don't know the answer to this, and I didn't want to call and kind of get in ahead of you. If there's going to be a point of communication.
So you can certainly call as a resident,
Sure I can.
knowing the concerns, and I would encourage you to do so.
Okay.
I would have to check with our town council to see if that's what we should do, to be honest.
Right.
In terms of the Society of Wetland Scientists,
Yeah.
typically, so they're, in general, New Hampshire has a licensure or a certificate. Massachusetts does not for wetland scientists. Typically, a lot of experienced wetland scientists are part of this society. So it's not
Is that their credential then?
what A professional wetland scientist, yes. So typically in Massachusetts, you see that credential on someone who wants to be able to put their stamp on various projects, but there's an application process you go through to get there, and you have to prove your education and things like that, and it says it all on their website. So I don't know the answer to, is it more of a, this is our policy but not the law? But I would, and it's not downgrading that group at all, because they do have quite a few very diligent members who are quite experienced and very good at what they do. But I believe because there is no state licensure, that that's sort of where it falls into a gray area, where it's not an electrician or a plumber's license, where it's a trade group or a journeyman's license.
Okay. What if I call this person tomorrow?
Yeah.
And then this person wants to talk to you?
Have them call me.
Okay.
That's fine.
But my question is that discussion outside, because you're gonna do whatever you're gonna do tonight? Or can you still take
No,
that
I think
information
it's-
and
so-
act upon it?
So it's not relevant to this project, because we could have someone who doesn't have those credentials come forward, propose a project, just like we have RDAs, notice of intent, proposed by residents, instead of who may have those credentials or may not. But we look to make sure that, like, a survey is stamped by a land surveyor, or an engineered plan is stamped by an engineer, just like Scott didn't engineer, he's not a civil engineer, so he didn't design the plan. I mean, he may have designed them, but he didn't draw up the plans, because he does not have those credentials. Someone he works with did, and that's who stamped the plans. So we check to make sure the right information is coming from the right people, but in terms of checking every single one, it's really, the resources there where they're not. You either hire someone to come out to confirm it, or we go out and confirm it ourselves if we're confident in it. So I don't foresee that impacting this project, but I think if you feel, and we have this information that he's financially involved, and that he's brought up this information that he has a financial interest and is designing the plans and proposing to develop something, and whether that goes against their mission statement or ethics, then I think it would still be valid to bring up. But in terms of it affecting this project, I don't think it would have an effect one way or another, but it may be something that's good to know,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
I get that general.
Okay.
Just
So it really doesn't, whether he's a financial interest in this or not, doesn't have anything to do whether or not he can,
It doesn't.
doesn't have anything to do with the buffer zones.
No,
No.
the commission has the ability at that point, when they dispose that information, to say, you know what, we'd rather have someone else look at this.
Yes, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is
It's an
here,
ethics
and
guideline,
it's,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
but.
So, and again, just for your peace of mind, and Rebecca, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know how anybody else is going to vote, depending. I think in the past, when things like this have happened, usually what happens is they'll refile, like we'll end up denying
Yeah,
the
so
one
they
that's
would
been
have
closed,
to.
because we asked him for information last time to provide more information on a few things. Generally speaking, and I can't talk for anybody else, it's something that we might deny on the grounds that we just weren't provided with adequate information. We requested information, it wasn't given to us. You know, we deny it on that grounds, and then they refile, or they just go ahead and close it and refile anyways to reopen it. And that's my guess is what would happen. I could be wrong. You know, I can't say what he's going to do, but my guess is, you know, it's as it stands now, it'll probably be blanket denial, or he's going to reopen it and it'll be back open for public discussion. Or he's going to refile and be back open for public discussion. If that makes
But
sense.
he can't refile once you guys say no.
You can. You have every right to. There's an appeals process,
Oh, I see.
a certain
Okay.
period of time afterwards, and if the appeal gets denied, you can refile the same information, but I've never heard of someone doing that.
Okay.
Just because I feel like you would just common sense says you would try it from a different angle or try and rework something and then come back, even if it's a minor change. But it would be interesting if someone would come back with the same, unless like Ryan was talking about, where if it doesn't get approved, then they resubmit with the same information, but the information that was asked for, so you're adding to the project, or reworking the project and saying, okay, it was closed out, I didn't meet the deadline to request a continuance of the paperwork, etc. So I need to still work on this project, and I still want to do this project, so I'm resubmitting. That's happened. But typically, once it's denied, it's not, okay, here's the exact same paperwork.
Let's try this again.
Yeah, I at least haven't seen it. It's not that it's impossible, but
If we close the public hearing, how soon do we have to vote by? Is there
we have 21 days, so I will double check that, but at least by next meeting.
and
But I
can,
will double check.
and can we still talk about it amongst ourselves outside of the public hearing before the vote, or do we have to go
cannot talk
straight?
outside of the public meeting about public hearing,
Nothing.
nothing.
So we need to be ready to vote.
Yep.
Right now.
So I will draft the order of conditions, and that will be sent before the meeting, like always. But you cannot vote or make a decision on those. You can, at the meeting, you can say, oh, let's add in this condition, I like that one, I didn't like that one, or let's add in this finding, I didn't like that one, I like that one, but you cannot have discussion about public hearing outside.
If I'm correct, right, we can still, while we can't discuss it amongst ourselves, you can still ask Rebecca procedural questions.
Yes.
So
you can do
would
that.
it be proper to approve it on these grounds, or would it be proper to disapprove it on, to ask
But
if you're trying to figure out how you want to vote on it? But yeah, no real.
Yeah.
Just one other
Please.
point of interest. There's a new development on the overall site. That there's a beaver dam on Danforth Brook that wasn't
Where?
there.
Where is it? It's by the bridge.
It's
Yeah, do you want to come on?
Beavers don't
And
usually
what-
call
what's
us
the name?
first.
No.
My name is Jim Garrity,
What is your address?
21 Century Mill Road, Continental.
Oh, yes, okay.
It's me. So here it is. So this is the house here, right?
Mhm.
And there's the dam there. So this is
What do you
the
mean,
road.
what is the dam?
This is
Under
beaver-
the tree?
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the beaver dam under the tree.
Huh.
So it's gonna back up and flood all over here.
Interesting.
Well, that was a new wrinkle in it.
So who owns this portion of the property?
And Scott.
Okay.
So Scott owns that.
So, just for the record, a person cannot breach that dam, remove the beaver, or impact the lodges without emergency house.
I get that.
I know, I'm
So
saying
it's not gonna like people probably
But I'm
don't.
saying, if you see
Right.
something.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's why I have
that-
pictures.
Okay, thank you.
That's not the first time that they've come.
Oh, yeah,
You gotta believe.
Yeah.
Whose house is that back there?
That's mine.
That's-
Yeah.
That's the existing house.
That's the one that the driveway goes up
Yes,
to?
yes.
And the beaver dam is,
So this is after the
Do you mind
driveway?
stating
Like
your
if
name and
the
address
driveway
for the
comes
record?
The driveway's
Here?
coming
Oh,
right here.
Richard Davis,
Yes, okay.
185 Hudson Road.
Right,
Thank
and this
you.
is Century Mill.
and this is the beaver dam right here?
No,
Under
Beaver
that
Dam,
line,
it's right there.
Oh,
And
sneaky
he's
little
gonna
devils.
build it up, yeah, so it's gonna flood all back that way.
Yeah,
Back
of course
up
it
the
will.
property, right?
Sneaky little cheeky buggers.
And where's the dam?
Damn.
It's under the tree.
Oh, I can see it now.
There have been dams there before.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
gonna-
yeah.
But you can see the old
Can you email that picture?
beyond
Yep.
where the fire department takes
Perfect.
water from that
Yeah.
pond.
He's gonna email
Lots
that
of-
to you, right?
Perfect.
Yeah,
I
I'll send it.
appreciate
Yeah.
that, thank you. And if they have timestamps associated with them, that would be great too.
Yep.
Any other audience questions or other questions regarding?
Well, as I always said,
This
leave
one?
it to beaver.
All right. In that case, I'm going to make a motion that we close the public hearing for 21 Century Mill Road.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. The Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue a public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider the notice of intent submitted by the Sam Library of Goddard Consulting regarding proposed construction of a single-family home and septic system on Lot 3 Century Mills Road. Any public questions on this one? Or actually, Rebecca, could you give us an update?
There's no update,
Okay. Did they request a continuance?
no.
Okay. Public comments on this one? All right. Any existing questions? All right. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for Lot 3 Century Mill Road.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue a public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider the notice of intent submitted by Sam Lavery of Goddard Consulting regarding the proposed construction of a single-family home and septic system on Lot 4 Century Mill Road. Rebecca, any updates?
No updates,
Did they ask for continuance?
no request to continue.
Any questions, comments? Any questions, comments from the board? I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for Lot 4 Century Mill Road.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue a public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a request for determination of applicability submitted by Sam Lavery of Goddard Consulting regarding proposed grading associated with the construction of a single-family home and septic system located at Lot 2 Century Mill Road. Rebecca, do we have any updates?
Nope.
They requested a continuance?
Nope.
Any comments? Any comments from the board? I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for Lot 2 Century Mill Road.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is that all? All right.
Can you just sign this? This is the same copy. Obviously, one was sent already, but just as a memorializing that we issued the enforcement. And the commission approved it. You guys are all closed out.
Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm sure we'll be seeing you.
Say hello to the beavers.
Will do.
You want to make any more puns? One more, come on.
I'll just flap my tail.
Yeah, so we passed everything. Do you have any preference on anything, or?
Nope.
Wise ass.
Right, so the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue a public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider the notice of intent submitted by Ducharme and Dillis on behalf of the Department of Public Works regarding the proposed replacement of one road culvert along with proposed catch basins, manholes, and associated grading off of Spectacle Hill Road and South Bolton Road between the junctions of Mill Pond Road and Wheeler Road. Any updates on this? Or, no, we didn't close it. We were waiting for...
What are we waiting for?
So we were just waiting for them to add in some things to the narrative.
Yep.
Okay.
But they were okay with closing out.
So we did close it, right?
No, we didn't.
Or we did not?
I think
Okay.
you said we were going to close it this meeting
Yeah.
for both, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Gavin Robinson at 328 South.
Oh, please,
There's
yeah.
an issue with the mapping that
Sure.
came out, but it was corrected.
Okay, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
On South Boulevard.
Yes, yeah, you had the initial.
Yeah,
catch
the
basin.
driveway.
No, that's,
Yep.
yeah. All right. Do you have any updates? Right. Any other questions, comments, thoughts on this? Board questions?
Nope.
All right.
Nope.
All right. So first, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for Department of Public Works road culvert replacement along with catch basins, manholes, and associated grading located off Spectacle Hill Road, South Bolton Road, between the junctions of Mill Pond Road and Wheeler Road.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
If I were to make a motion to approve the notice of intent, do I have to add the following conditions?
It's in my opinion, suggestion that we should wait until October 1st
Okay.
to make a vote on it. If
That's
that's okay. And then I can draft.
perfectly fine.
That way.
All right. I was going to say, as long as DPW commit. Which will
Yeah.
make, and I'm guessing that we're going to be the same for the next one?
Yep.
All right. good comment. So the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Button Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider the notice of intent submitted by Ducharme Dills on behalf of the Department of Public Works regarding the proposed catch basin and discharge pipe to improve drainage on South Bolton Road. Any comments on this project? All right. We didn't have any existing questions. All right. In that case, I make a motion that we close the public hearing for the notice of intent for the Department of Public Works to propose catch basin and discharge pipe to improve drainage on South Bolton Road.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So close.
So what did we, so now, just quickly, on top of the minutes, can you tell me, that was a copy? Because I don't think we have one for minutes.
Yeah, I thought so.
We're missing Ward.
Missing Ward, Lori was here last time.
Yep.
Because we don't have four, outside, without Lori, right?
Jeff, Bill, Kip, Lori,
I was not
Right.
here September 3rd.
says you were.
Aha, you caught it, there's also another typo in
I
it.
was here too.
You were here?
I thought so.
Yeah, you were here.
Yeah, you were.
So you must have.
Wait,
you
wait,
must-
I was
you-
here.
you
What was that?
dressed up as
Here.
Will?
Yeah, you did.
I was here. I was here.
I remember.
Yes.
I thought you didn't want any more animals.
So we had Ryan, Jeff,
Anybody want
and
a couple of
Emily,
goats, by the way?
Yes.
and not Lori.
I don't think
Okay.
Lori was here on the 3rd.
No,
So
Lori was
everyone-
not here.
Everyone can vote except them. On the
Okay.
minutes.
Can I second?
No.
Man, you're not here.
You can, you weren't part of
I
it.
don't have any problems with minutes, by the way.
I do,
would-
so,
You do?
you failed the test.
I didn't get a copy of the minutes.
I know, I left
don't
one
know.
out.
It's all right. I know, usually I read through it at work too. It's all sorts of great.
So, on the Century Mill Road, I'm pretty sure it says Century Mill Road, instead of the lot number is in the action items. Is that correct? Did you guys change it?
Oh, on the second page, 5 and 6.
Yep.
You're right.
3.
Okay, so if you would like, you can approve them as amended.
What happened?
These were the
You were talking about
September.
Lot 3, they were here, it says
Lot,
21.
Do we're gonna have to go and approve those amendments at some point in time.
Yes, so at the next meeting, I'll have them, because I assume Lori probably won't be with us for another, she's working for another while.
Yeah.
So I'll organize and see if we can do any, and I'll just bring those at the next meeting. So I'm not sure.
So are we waiting on updated plans for those two? For the.
So the updated plans are just basically what we stated, but we need
Right.
it to be written on the plans.
Got it.
So yes.
Yep, okay, and then we'll approve and.
Yep,
Okay,
so
next
on the,
meeting.
that's why I was saying wait to draft, because on the
Yeah.
order of conditions, it will state the date of the plan with the revisions, so
Mhm.
that would include
The updated plans,
Yeah.
right, okay.
That way I don't have to do word salad. I can just say
Yeah,
this
no,
as submitted.
totally
Can we
makes
approve
sense.
this? Yeah, that's great.
so. Who's a C or a K?
My real name is Christopher.
I'll put that faking you up by saying it.
Got that one too.
Huh?
That one was not a typo though.
Oh, it's not?
Is that the MVP?
So,
Is that the MVP?
Did you read the letter? Did you
Yeah.
read the letter?
Oh, the promotion.
No,
Format, that's all I.
you're talking with the letter about the 4D?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have a copy of it. What do you need for it?
Letter.
Oh, yeah, yeah, but the language in it, I
Doesn't
think.
matter.
I don't with me.
I questioned that right there, but she explained that. I mean, not only housing crisis.
Right.
It's bad.
Yes,
It's bad.
huh?
It's pretty bad.
More people just need to move to Delaware.
What?
There's nothing down there.
Okay, I can
Oh.
Virginia.
You volunteering?
I talked to,
We plenty of room in Wyoming.
it's so funny, I
Come
talked
on,
to.
we're going to Wyoming. I know, we all go. Plenty of
I talked to a
room
woman
too, yeah. Let's go.
at one of my booths, by Energy, who was living in Delaware. And she said, it's crazy down there. People from Pennsylvania are coming in and buying up all the property, and there's only one road in and one road out. It was like,
Ahead of the curve. All right, so I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes for our September 3rd, 2019 meeting as drafted and amended at this meeting.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we have one more item.
Okay, should I have to open this?
Feel left out.
No.
Okay, you
I'll see, I can send
can,
it
you
on
can
the
close.
The commission will now review the
You
letter
got here
drafted
late.
regarding Senate Bill 810, any proposed amendments to the minutes.
So in your packet, on this, the motions, outline, I did include the amendment that's being proposed, and that is what the letter is referring to. And that's Senate Bill 810, being presented by Mr. Patrick O'Connor, and currently the status is that it's referred to the Joint Committee on Housing. This is legislation relative to affordable housing built near wetlands. And we wanted to just establish the fact that the concern is not with low and moderate income housing, but rather the proximity to environmentally sensitive resource areas, and the fact that local bylaws protect these resource areas more so than the state because of local services and needs that are provided, inclusive of private wells and private septic systems, which aren't obviously across the board in every town. So the letter that you have before you was drafted, and the question is, and it was actually initiated by concerned residents and community members, and they felt that this was an important bill for the commission and the town to support. So what I would be asking the commission is, a few questions. One is, do we want to send a letter? Do we want to send this letter with any changes you would like to propose? And if so, excuse me, and you would like to support the bill by doing so, also respectfully requesting from the Board of Selectmen and other departments in the town hall, including Board of Health and Planning, to send similar letters in support of the bill and to encourage that. So those are the handful of questions.
Yes to all of them.
Yes.
I think it's kind of where I'm at.
I'll even
Yeah.
sign this stupid.
Absolutely.
Well, and then the other thing is, if there's any edits, which Jeff already mentioned, he would like to see a formatting change, which is fine.
There's
That's
also,
fine.
there's
There's
one little paragraph that is a bigger font. I
Yeah.
know this is very willy-nilly,
No,
but
Yes.
you know, just I thought the language was good. I thought the points made were great, and like Jeff, there was just a couple like formatting,
Yep, that's fine.
silly things, but
So here's, like, again, it's more little grammar things and little mini words,
Okay.
flow issues. But my question was, is it Mr. Chairman or is it just Chairman? I think it's
I
just
should double
Chairman.
check.
But then I was like,
It's Brendan.
But sometimes it is. It's Madam Secretary. It's not just Secretary, or is it? Like,
Yeah.
that was just an odd little question for me.
Yep.
And I hate that they use uneconomic, but they have it in the bill, so you got to keep using
Yeah,
it.
that's why.
There's nothing worse than putting not uneconomic. It's not uneconomic, so it's economic. Okay. But I couldn't see a different way of writing it because it is in the bill. I was like, that sentence just does not
Where is this?
flow right.
Yeah. And it doesn't
And
necessarily.
I totally understand the meaning of it and what it gets at, and again, it matches what's in here, so I was fine. But yeah, like I said, I have little mini
Yeah.
commas
I can
and
relook
words
at
and
that,
flow,
yeah.
and But on that, I thought it sounded good, and again, it's just asking them to actually put it to a vote, right? It's just asking them to bring it to the floor.
Yep.
So,
would it would, I guess it would make it so that they could not waive certain bylaws with the 40B process? Is that what the purpose of this bill is ultimately?
No.
yeah,
Well-
should not be exempt from local bylaws and ordinances concerning
Right.
building and the disturbance of environmentally sensitive areas, including but not limited to
Yeah, so I
DPW,
wouldn't,
watersheds, everything.
I wouldn't say it doesn't allow them to waive it, but it doesn't automatically,
It doesn't override.
it doesn't override, thank you,
Okay.
It
automatically.
doesn't override our decision in our bylaws,
Okay.
which is what I think that 40B tries to do.
Right,
Well,
allows
it
it
doesn't-
some, it allows
it
them to,
doesn't-
yeah.
It doesn't try to do that, but unfortunately, that's what happens the
Yeah.
majority of the time.
Well, especially in like with that, the one that we're talking about, because that was right smack dab in the middle of a swamp anyway.
Right.
So, anyway. I agree, you know.
Yeah, and in the letter, just for the recording and anyone watching after it's publicized, this letter is more generic. It doesn't speak about projects in the town of Bolton. It talks about regulations in the town of Bolton, and it talks about the 40B process and in relation to the Senate Bill 810, but it does not mention projects specifically or specific issues with any proposed projects at this time. Just to be clear.
I agree with that too.
Okay. I'm gonna go. I was just thinking if I can throw more than one thing on this. We're gonna do a roll call vote, if that's fine.
Yep.
A yay vote would mean it would indicate that yes, you do think we should send a letter, and that indeed you are fine with this letter, and that you also believe we should encourage other town boards and commissions, specifically the selectmen, town planning, to send similar letters. So it's kind of across the board yay to everything. A nay vote would be across the board no to everything. If you want to split your vote between the two, please speak now. All right, then we're going to go with a simple yay or nay. So, all those in favor? Bill?
Yay.
Kip?
Yay.
Jeff?
Yay.
Emily?
Yay.
And let's make it unanimous yay, please.
Okay.
Would we let other boards sign our letter, or are we asking them to do their own?
Would you like other people to have their own letter? So I was speaking with the town administrator about this just because he was assisting me with the first round of edits to the letter, which I don't believe was sent out to you all. This was after I'd already sent it to you. But at that time, he thinks after some discussion that it's best that we do separate letters, because then it's most likely going to be either the same letter or very similar wording. But just for formatting and the university of letters coming from the town, he thinks it'll be beneficial to do it that way.
I would go with the hierarchy. Ask them if they'll write their own letter, and if they say no, ask them if they'll sign ours.
Okay.
And if they say no, then let us know. We'll make fun of them.
Okay.
We'll hound them at their meetings.
So always don't get on that.
So if you have edits on letters, just give it to me, and then I'll do a final round of edits and include everything, and then I will have one ready for you all to sign at your discretion, either before or at the October 1st meeting.
When are they supposed to vote on this bill? That's the 810.
Done.
We're asking them to bring it to the
Yeah,
letters
so
basically
currently it's
doesn't
in
even mention the bill, and then
It's
Yeah.
just
please
sitting-
bring the bill to a vote
Yeah.
because we think it's a good bill.
Currently
Yeah.
it's in purgatory.
That's terrible.
I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that it's
Yes.
purgatory, but basically it's at a standstill at this point. That's what I meant.
Well said, Rachel. Any other outstanding business?
Nope. I don't believe so. Aside from the minutes, but we don't have a forum for the other
Well,
minutes.
I have one
Yes,
little
Jeff.
report.
Please.
Basically, I went to the town of Harvard's deer
Oh, yes.
issue.
Deer management.
Deer management
presentation.
Yeah, basically it was not a conservation commission meeting, it was a public meeting
For the
when they talked about what to do about the deer population in Harvard. They had 3 proposals. One was to send them all to Bolton. That really wasn't a proposal. They all voted yes. But they had 3, either somehow or another they were going to do 3 things. But the main thing was that they were trying to allow hunting on conservation properties. That's what this whole thing was all about.
Again,
it seems
in
to me.
Harvard.
Huh?
In Harvard.
In Harvard,
That's what I read.
not anywhere else, but it might affect what we were doing. They're talking about bow hunting and with a chair so that it only goes into the ground and not with guns on conservation property. So it was sort of an interesting slideshow. The guy, I can't remember the name of the fellow who was, something or other.
Was this
He was,
Fish and Game or something like that?
No.
no,
They
he
have
was a
deer-
local guy.
They have a deer management subcommittee in Harvard, and I believe this was their group reported
Yeah,
to
it was a
the-
3-year study on this thing
Yeah.
that they talked about deer and how many deer there were per acre and
Yeah, I read
So
some
they did
deer
similar
lists,
surveys to what we had done
They're-
in terms of collecting baseline documentation, but they've been doing it for a longer time than Bolton has.
yeah. And they did do some interesting things about the way they measure it and how the deer come in and they eat all the trees, but they leave the ferns. So when you see a land full of ferns, you think, oh, isn't that pretty? But it really is because the deer ate all the trees, and no trees were growing up because the deer ate all the trees, and
Yeah, so
you
you
know,
have
all
the
the
gap.
saplings and everything else like that, among other things. And there was some pushback on it from people who didn't want hunters out there when they're on it. And there was a couple of hunters there who were saying that, you know, it was a good thing to cull the herd, but nobody really could tell me how big the herd was. You know, but you know, I guess it's going to have to come before the Conservation Commission
In Harvard.
in Harvard
Yeah.
to make a decision on that. The only thing that they didn't say, well, I guess the hunting season is from October 1st to December 31st,
For deer.
basically, isn't it? And
for archery.
no, for everything. I mean,
No.
archery is
Different.
like,
How can anybody hunt with
Yeah.
rifles in conservation?
No.
no. I'm not sure whether that was, they were talking about rifles.
I'd really be.
No, there were 3. You know, they talked about whether guns could be on it because there's a 500-foot setback on private property
From residents.
from residents.
Which includes anything. So
Anything.
Barns,
Barns, eds, anything, you know, playgrounds, anything, you know, and they were adamant, they wanted to just do bow hunting, and they quoted Weston. Weston has that allows bow hunting, and apparently there are more deer per acre, per square mile in Weston than any place else in the world. I didn't know that, I thought,
Not in the world, but yeah.
but a lot, not in the world, I take it back, but I
Do you
just.
have a pun for the deer?
Yeah.
Nice neighborhood, right?
No, I thought it was rather sexist, they were planning on just shooting does and not the bucks, so.
Yeah.
Huh? What's up with that? I don't know. But it does seem, yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're hunting a
and there was some questions about sterilization, but you can't bait the deer. You have to go out there and sort of propose it to them. But you have to get close enough to say, hey, would you like to be sterilized, deer? You know?
Don't be so crazy.
You can't bait them. You have to sort of capture them. You can't bait. And there was second proposal was to bait and poison. You can't really do that either.
No, you poison.
No, you can't do that. Do any of those 3. You know, so they were talking about archery, and there were some people that were sort of against the archery thing, and some people were saying it was a good thing, and I don't know. I mean, it's liable to come before us here at some point. It might,
Yeah,
you know.
possible.
I mean, somebody might
So
bring it up.
the only property that we share with Harvard is Bower Springs.
Bower Springs, yes.
So that's when it would become relevant, and that's why we're staying up to date on the information. That proposal hasn't come before us at any point, and at this point, we do not allow hunting on public property owned by the town of Bolton or publicly owned conservation property, which means every conservation property, unless the conservation restriction on private property says otherwise. But I'd be interested to see what Harvard's Conservation Commission's final decision is on it, because at that point, we may be hearing some conversation.
I was gonna say, I don't know how much you're in contact with them, but is it possible for them to exclude? Is it an all or nothing for their conservation lands? I mean, can they say,
No, they
we're
had,
gonna allow it, but we're not gonna allow it on this
no,
property?
they had
this
some,
property?
they had a bunch of, 3 or 4 different properties that they were gonna allow it. It's not on every single property.
Because I would think that's one thing we would, regardless of what they found, one thing we would request is please don't do the second half of the Bowers simply because it's shared with us and the people on the property.
You
Yeah.
would have to post.
I actually
Yeah.
couldn't figure out who was gonna determine how many hunters were gonna be on that property.
So
They had
I
a property,
assume-
I can't remember where it was, but they were gonna divide it in quarters and only have one,
So
I don't know how they're
sometimes-
gonna manage it.
And not to sort of go on a tangent about this, but Weston does have a really good process for that.
Yeah.
You have to go through basically an accuracy test before you're even allowed to go out, or even apply, and then as part of that application process, you do another, and then they only issue a certain number of permits, so it's a very controlled situation. But it's not like every time you go out, you harvest a deer, and every time you go out, you get 5 deer or 4 deer, so it's a process.
No, the one hunter that was talking about, he said, in 10 years I've been hunting here in Harvard, I've only got 3 deer. He's not a very good hunter. But-
Well, and the other thing is, what we found, when we did the baseline survey, they're going to the conservation properties because that's the open
So,
land that's
safe
left.
one.
Well,
Yeah, that's the old
the
one,
prime
yeah.
habitat that's not
Right.
disturbed,
No,
or,
it's harder to get permission from residents to it.
What?
yeah.
It's hard to get permission. From
There was one fellow there who owned a farm in Harvard who said that he allowed hunting on his land because he split the venison, which was organic,
A lot of
grass-fed,
people
free
allow
range,
hunting on
better than
I
that.
would
You
say
shed
a lot
market
of farmers
baskets.
around here allow to take a lot of farmers.
Better
No,
than
no, yeah,
that.
I don't
Yeah,
doubt that, but neighborhoods would be hard to.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, and that's why only some conservation properties could even be applicable to that discussion, because you have 500 feet setback.
Yeah, it'd be hard to do that.
Unless that property owner gives you permission, you're not getting in 100 feet of their residence, and if you do, you're in a lot bigger trouble then.
If you get caught.
So I think it's firearms you can't shoot within 500 feet of property. I think you can shoot a bow anywhere you want.
I
Yeah.
would double check
No.
That's a
that.
good question, yeah.
I know.
I think you can target shoot.
No, I think you can shoot a bow anywhere you want.
Yeah.
No, I'm.
We'll have to figure
No,
that out.
you may be right about bow hunting,
Yeah.
because you do.
I don't think you want to bow hunt and conservate. It's just uncomfortable.
Yeah,
It
I'm not,
happens
again,
in
this is
Sudbury.
Harvard.
We
I'm
see it
not
all the
questioning
time,
it.
right? You see people walking down the trails, with their guns and stuff.
Well,
It's
you
like,
can
what are
walk
doing
through
out
a
here?
property, but
Right.
not actively hunt on a property.
Anyway, it was
If you wanna go
interesting.
deer hunt, go to Maine or wherever you want to go.
It was sort of interesting.
Yes,
They did
actually,
talk about the
Wow,
survey.
Delaney.
Yeah.
They did talk about the deer hunt on Quabbin and how they allow a hunt on the Quabbin, but there's nobody there, right? The Quabbin is pretty open, but it was this high per deer per square mile, and it dropped down to this. And the other thing that they were talking about is that it will affect the ticks. There was some
Yeah.
talk about the deer, if they cull the deer here.
Right,
Yeah, well, everybody, and then they said, the less deer we have, the less ticks we have. And there was a lot of pushback on that because people said, what about the mice? Don't they carry ticks?
Mice.
And I don't know whether they're going to allow bow hunting on mice. Who knows? But
That would
just,
be pretty sad.
Yeah.
We can
Only involve
That
that
was accuracy test.
We'll take that accuracy. It's great, yeah.
anyway, it was sort of it was interesting to see how the whole thing.
No, thank you for
worked out.
calling. I'm glad somebody
Thank
could
you.
go, yeah. All right.
And
Anything
they
else?
had Thin Mints at that thing.
If I know that we're gonna be
The
take the day off of work.
conservation agent did pass out cookies to everybody there.
Oh, they did?
Said-
But
Wow.
you said it was not a conservation commission meeting. I will bring cookies on October 1st.
All right, that's on
I will
camera.
make them myself.
Write that in the minutes.
Yeah, we got it down, yeah.
Rebecca will bring
It's on camera.
Are we supposed to show up early on October 1st? Is that?
Oh, yes, thank you for reminding me. So you need to show up, please, at 6:30. The public hearings will not start until 7 o'clock, but at the request of advisory during the budget hearing process last year, they requested that we respectfully requested that we present, we meaning I, present to them what the Conservation Commission does and what I do. So I have drafted that did I email that to you yet?
Well,
So
that'll
I
be interesting.
email that to you tomorrow. I have emailed it back to the chair of advisory to make sure I'm including everything that they want covered. But it's, the main things are, you know, what's the jurisdiction, what's the purpose, what govern, what rules and regulations and laws govern what we do, and what I do, and how that works. So, that's what the presentation is on. For all interested, please come and attend and watch, because it will be fun.
And cookies.
And cookies! Actually, that's perfect, because that would be great while I ramble on
I
about
think pie would be better.
regulations.
We can
So
talk
just
more
no
afterwards.
information about the
We
Conservation
can talk
Commission.
more afterwards. That's an interesting one.
I had a lot of them this year.
Anything else? Do? All right.
Let's go.
In that case, I'm going to make a motion that we officially close the Tuesday, September 17th, 2019 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night, EATV.